Welcome to the Flow State Podcast, where we're all about finding balance. We're your hosts, Monica Groney
and Nora Candido. Now let's get into the flow.
Hey, Flow Staters. We are back with another episode today. We are doing our seasonal community Q&A. We got some great questions from you all. Thank you so much for submitting all of your questions. We will do our best to answer those. Of course, always noting that sometimes it's really hard to answer these questions because we don't have the ability to go back and forth with you. We don't know your individual situation. And we've said this a million times before, but so much of this is super individualized. So we will provide the best answers we can, but they may be a little generic.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out. I love that we get to do this and share little snippets and also just hear what you guys are genuinely needing support on. It's really important for us to hear that. But yeah, somebody just told me that they loved hearing me say that every individual is like this unique puzzle that I get to solve. And that's what I love about my job. But that is why it can be really challenging to answer these because it's usually not a quick fix. Otherwise, you probably would have figured it out.
Yeah. I was just listening to one of my nutritional school modules, and it was talking about just how we're all bio-individuals and what one diet or one protocol that might work so well for someone, like say someone has PCOS or something like that, and one avenue that might work really well for one person and you try it and you just feel awful. Like there's just not a direct answer that's going to be perfect for everyone. So I think what we preach so much is like tune into your body, see how it feels. And yeah, like sure, be willing to try different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Let's dive in.
Awesome. All right. Question number 1 was someone asking about experiencing awful acne and breakouts around ovulation. What could my next steps be?
So this was actually my personal experience where a lot of individuals tend to experience acne in their PMS week, like the week leading up to their cycle. I was experiencing it around ovulation where you're supposed to have the best skin. So what gives? And again, like what it was for me might not be what it is for you, but some things that I generally see around this is there's a root cause. Our skin is such a reflection of what is going on the inside, and that can be inflammation from multiple sources, but that's why I go back and listen to the episode on like the gut and hormone connection, where I really like to approach things from the GI tract first, because it's typically a pretty big driver of hormone disruption and also can be a cause for acne, especially. That's something that I see really, really often.
Yeah. In our ovulatory phase, our hormones are a bit higher, even testosterone. And I know that that does control our sebum, which is like the oiliness to our skin, how our skin produces oil. So it could be an issue throughout your whole cycle with the ability to detox your hormones properly. So you're having a buildup, if you will, of hormones. So yeah, like Nora said, gut, pooping regularly. It also can come back to like your liver and providing liver support. So all of those detox pathways can be really, really important. And I think so often with acne, we think of like treating topically, but it really does come down to how our body is excreting our hormones, our toxins, and all of those different things. And if we have that buildup in our system, it's going to try to come out somehow, and we might be seeing it come out on our chin hormonally.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely echo like supporting the detoxification pathways. A separate question that I got from someone was experiencing acne during pregnancy, and it makes sense. Like your hormones are fluctuating tremendously. You have way more hormones than you do throughout your normal cycle, and they kind of stay elevated to support that pregnancy. So you can't do a lot of the topical, like you can't take retinol, you can't do drying ingredients because they're not good for baby. So this is a time where I really say doubling down, supporting the liver, making sure you're going to the bathroom. A lot of people when they're pregnant are constipated if they're taking especially iron capsules that can really, really back us up. So we want to make sure that we're going to the bathroom every day. We're having those complete movements, getting enough fiber in to help soak up those hormones and help us go to the bathroom. I also really love ground flax seeds for this reason. One, for the fiber, but also two, because they are like a helpful manager in how much estrogen our body holds on to. So if that's something that would be beneficial for you, it's a great thing to incorporate and safe during pregnancy.
How do you like to incorporate flax seeds?
I do ground flax seeds in everything. So I put it in my oats every single morning. I put it on top of a salad. You can mix it into a smoothie. You could add it to pasta sauce. It'll like thicken things up a little bit. It's really easy. To me, it has a super mild nutty flavor, so it's not hard to mask it in any food. How about you?
Yeah, I just threw it in my like yogurt and granola yesterday.
Exactly. So easy.
Awesome. Okay, question number 2. Are there caloric intake recommendations for different phases?
Yeah, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so around ovulation and in our luteal phase, we do have different energy needs. If you think about what our body is actually doing, of course, around ovulation, so important. We're trying to make a baby then. And then after ovulation, that uterine lining is being built up to kind of host egg. So our body does have different energy production needs, of course. There's about an 8 to 26% increase. And with that need comes the additional need for protein and complex carbs to help build up that uterine lining and just support what is occurring reproductively. I think especially we've talked about this before, but the protein need comes back to as well. If you want to maintain muscle mass during that time, the proteins are going to get shuttled away from the muscle and to the uterine lining. So if we want to maintain both, we have to also increase our protein intake. So just being mindful of that. If you are already being mindful of protein, it's great. If not, maybe consider just upping it around your luteal phase. So yeah, definitely there is a caloric difference as well as just being mindful of the macronutrients that you are consuming and how that could support your energy needs.
Absolutely. We also have appetite changes throughout our cycle too. So you might notice that intuitively your body is hungrier in the second half of your cycle. And this is not because you're lacking willpower or there's literally a physiological need that your body is asking for more nutrition. So tuning into that too, try as best you can to remove any judgment around it. You genuinely need more. So even just having this knowledge and understanding can be helpful to help honor those cravings. With that being said, if you're not hitting your protein, if you're not incorporating complex carbohydrates, body also during this time, our feel-good neurotransmitter serotonin is coming down. So we're seeking like quick fixes. We're seeking more sweet, more sugar, things that are going to help increase that serotonin. So just being mindful of this, that we need to really be nailing our protein, incorporating more complex carbs. Otherwise, then body is really going to be saying, tank is not full. Like we need more here.
Yeah, your body's just going to keep asking for more fuel until you really hit those needs. So I think for all the people out there being like, man, my cravings are awful. It's like, great. How can we increase the protein and the complex carbs, not just the simple carbs?
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I love incorporating higher fat foods just in general. I find that that's what really gives me the lasting power to stretch in between meals. So yes, we're talking a lot about protein and carbohydrates at this time, but fats take longer to digest and are really going to help give us, again, that like more lasting energy here.
Yeah, I just naturally have a really high fat diet. So I don't even think that I think of it. It's just like I eat full fat yogurt, like I put heavy cream in my coffee. I'm using a lot of oils and on my salads and all of that. Like I have a relatively high fat diet. So yeah, definitely take that into consideration. I think I watch like my parents eat. I think I've talked about this before, but they're very focused on the low fat diet that was a very much fad. So yeah, look into your fat intake.
Same. And definitely a reminder too of like high fat might feel really, really good for us, whereas it might not feel as good for you. But again, maybe going back and listening to the blood sugar module, just knowing that each meal should last us at least minimum 3 to 4 hours. And if it's not, then we need to go back and make sure that we're getting enough and a balance of the nutrients. That's all.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love this one. I'm a college student and I want to cycle sync, but feel like I don't have control over my schedule.
Sis, me too.
It's funny reflecting back when I think about college, I'm like, that was the most regimented routine that I've ever had. Like, my husband David and I always talk about, we're still like chasing that college routine that we used to have. So it's funny to hear this in comparison to adulthood.
Yeah. And I think, too, this question probably comes from someone learning about cycle syncing and feeling overwhelmed by it and thinking that it has to be a full implementation or nothing. That it has to be like, okay, well, like my brain is functioning in this way, so I can't do this homework right now because of X, Y, and Z. Like the world is still happening around us. And as much as we would love for it to be perfect and for us to be able to put everything in boxes aligned with our cycle, it unfortunately doesn't happen that way. So my kind of thought process in answering this question is just start with the one thing of just tracking your cycle and getting familiar with how each of the weeks, each of the phases really feels to you, and starting to embody like, I know in my body that this phase is coming up and I'm going to feel most like this. And I think like for me, it's just having that awareness and being able to go into my week kind of knowing how I'm going to feel and look at my schedule and be like, okay, is there anything I can take off my plate this week that's in alignment with my energy? Or, hey, my energy is going to be great this week because I know in this phase I feel really good. Like I'm going to load up. So I think just getting to know your cycle is really the key with cycle syncing.
For sure. And yeah, if you're eating in a dining hall where you don't have say over what foods are being served, you can be aware and maybe reference a list, but again, not using that as another rule or a way to even restrict your body to. It is really such an open invitation, and just at the end of the day, in order to support our cycle, we need to be getting enough nutrition. So go back to those most basic things first. And then, sure, maybe it is more of the movement side of things that you can work on, or maybe it's more social things. If you have a lot of things going on in your social calendar that you might be able to tweak based on your cycle, or just knowing like, okay, maybe the day or two before my bleed, I don't really want to be around a lot of people, honoring that too, giving yourself more rest if that's what you need at that time. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah. And the dining hall situation is so challenging, right? Like we don't get to choose. You're not at a grocery store. You're not cooking for yourself. But I know in college, I kept a lot of snacks and food in my room, in my dorm room. And so it's like maybe you are doing things like Brazilian nuts or, having the small things that you can snack on that are supporting you, even if you're not able to choose the food that you're eating at your primary meals.
Yeah, or even fruits and veggies and things that you could keep, maybe if you have a fridge in your room. Or if you are cooking for yourself, then yeah, using that as a tool and a gentle guide.
Awesome. Okay. Period cramps. What can I do? This is a very broad question and a great one. Um, yeah, maybe first, Nora, would you share what is normal with period cramps and what is abnormal for period cramps?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great observation. Some cramping is normal. At the end of the day, it is an inflammatory process that's going on. And what I really like to talk about is how everything in that area is so close together. We have our GI tract right there, we have our bladder, and we have our uterus and our female organs. So inherently, there might be a little bit of discomfort, and that can extend to your lower back. It can even, for some individuals, they feel it down their legs if there is some inflammation that is driving it. So that it can be normal. If you're to a point where you cannot do your daily tasks, your daily living, and it's impeding it, or if you need medication before every single cycle, those are two signs I would say that we are incurring more inflammation, more cramps. But really happy to share this. There are so many things that we can do to support this from a nutrition, from a lifestyle standpoint. So I would say the biggest misconception even around this is that actually moving your body can be helpful. You might feel uncomfortable, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but even getting through that movement, even if it's a walk or getting on a bike, if you can do a lift, that is actually going to be helpful in reducing some of this discomfort as well.
Yeah, definitely. And other just kind of nutrient side of things that can be super supportive. Like Nora said, it's very inflammation. It's like an inflammation response. So omega-3s are amazing. Some of the, fattier foods that we were just talking about, wild salmon, sardines, walnuts, chia seeds, those are all great omega-3 sources. Flaxseed is a great source of omega-3s. Hemp seeds, it's great for, fiber, protein, all of those things. And then vitamin E rich foods, things like sunflower seeds, almonds, pumpkin seeds, all great to support the cramping.
Yeah, definitely. And this is actually where I find a lot of people really benefit from taking Maria as well, is because of the amount of magnesium. And the amount of magnesium can really help our muscles to just relax and ease some of that tension. And it also might help you to go to the bathroom for a lot of individuals, where this can also bring some relief. Again, what I was sharing is everything being so close together that if you are constipated, if you're backed up, it's just putting more pressure on everything around there. So I personally love using the elixir, especially around this time. Even if I start to get a headache, I'm like, I'm going to use this first. Like, can we try this natural remedy first before jumping to take the ibuprofen or the Advil? Because Advil, pain medication, is such a huge driver for a lot of GI issues. If that's one thing that I could share, we haven't talked about this on the podcast, but that is such a big trigger that if you're relying on even monthly use of a medication like this, that is going to be tearing away your GI tract lining, your stomach lining, and putting you at risk for issues.
Yeah, definitely. Other things too, and I noticed this in my own body, but even if I have been eating out more or drinking more alcohol, which I rarely do, but if I'm celebrating something for a month or something like that, my cramps will be increased more. So those are some very inflammatory things, is like a change in our diet, eating out. There's inevitably more sugar and more processed things in your food that you don't know are even there. So alcohol, all of those things play a role in that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And stress. Stress is a component of all of these things and is definitely going to play a role in your cycle. So just, again, being more gentle on yourself. Like, if you've had a really tough month, whether work has been crazy or there's something going on in your personal life, that cycle might be a one-off thing. It might not be your new future. So don't go into this downward spiral. It could just be this time and this time only.
Yeah. One thing too you were mentioning is just how it's all very close together down there. And one thing I do notice around my cycle is, we talk about bloat around our cycles, that cramping and bloating are very common things we hear of. I actually just feel like, I guess I'm a little bit bloated before my period, but it's like, if we think about our uterus and our lining, like growing before we shed it, and I don't know if this is scientific, but for me, this is what it feels like, is like, yeah, I do feel like I'm more bloated before my period, which just makes sense because we have a thickening of tissue during that phase. So I think it's just normal.
Yeah, and there is a hormonal component to that too. We know that estrogen actually causes more fluid retention. So there is, like, in the 4 to 5 days leading up to your cycle, another rise in estrogen. And it could also be that where, like, body is actually holding on to more liquids at that time. But yeah, that like heaviness or bloating or discomfort, there's something happening in there. Like, there is a process going on. And maybe approaching it from this, like, wow, that's amazing standpoint, instead of, if you need to not wear leggings during this time so that you're not hyper fixated on that sensation, maybe wearing dresses or looser fitting clothing so that things can breathe and you're not just suffocating yourself as well. Like, please.
I noticed it a lot once I came off my IUD and I started cycling normally again. I was like, oh, like my body shape is fluctuating monthly. But instead of shaming or feeling bad about it, I was like, this is actually kind of cool. Like my body's doing its biological thing. So I think just observe it and ask questions to yourself of like, oh, what is this?
Yeah, love that.
Okay, next question was, how do cycle phases impact anxiety? We actually have a whole blog post on this on the Maria website. So yeah, you can go and check that out. But for a lot of people, hormones are dropping in our luteal phase. And our hormones, estrogen and progesterone, have a direct impact on our neurotransmitters, which, as you know, is kind of how, like, where our mood can come from. So serotonin, dopamine, all those things, that has a true impact on our mood. So as those hormones change, we're going to have mood fluctuations. So this may occur in your body as having an increase in anxiety. One of the other things that I did want to bring up was that if you are someone who has anxiety all month long, you're an anxious person, you know that about yourself, the luteal phase and that hormonal change can actually just exacerbate that anxiety that you have, which is called PME. And a lot of people can often confuse PMDD and PME, where if you're someone who has anxiety, regardless of your cycle phase, and then it gets worse before your period, that is more likely PME, where PMDD is like in other areas of your cycle, earlier phases of your cycle, you don't have those mood disorders, and then you have it specifically in the luteal phase. So just wanted to kind of call that out.
Yeah, I want to just do a little bit of clarification here. So, we talk a lot about like the low hormone phase being the first half of our cycle and then the high hormone phase in the back half of our cycle. And when we're talking about that, we're talking more estrogen and progesterone. But there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different hormones in our body. And more so, these are the neurotransmitters that we're talking about that are dropping in the second half. So I just wanted to clarify on that sense. What stimulates our period is when estrogen and progesterone do drop off at the end. And that can, for some individuals, be highly correlated, especially we're talking about PMDD, with mood fluctuations, because they, even if it is the appropriate response, a normal action, might just be more aware or sensitive to those hormone fluctuations. So I just wanted to elaborate on that.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so if you are someone who experiences anxiety, it might just be that reaction, or you could just have it heightened during that period of time, and that's just all systems correlating together, and neurotransmission, your brain, your hormones, all kind of playing off of each other.
Yeah, and when I think about like estrogen and progesterone in general, estrogen is more of our higher energy, kind of this buzzy life force, where progesterone is more calming. So another thing that I commonly see is that if we're not ovulating, we're never really tapping into that relaxation phase from progesterone. We need to be ovulating in order to have adequate levels of progesterone. So even in this back half of your cycle, if you notice that you have an uptick in anxiety, that can be driven just by having too much estrogen in your body and not enough of that progesterone to help counterbalance or even things out. So it's something to be mindful of, especially like if you hadn't experienced anxiety before and this is a new thing for you, and where is this coming from? And I think this looks different. There's a whole anxiety spectrum, and I've actually been in a therapy course right now learning all about the roots of anxiety. That's been really, really interesting as well. But if this is a newfound thing, it's definitely something that I would want to talk to a provider about, because there are likely things that we can be doing.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So the next one is, what is the difference between AG1 or athletic greens and Maria or the PMS elixir? What is the difference? So I'll speak definitely to the athletic greens side of things, where in general, I do not think that most people need a greens powder, personally. My kind of qualm in general, I'm not just calling out this specific brand, but when we're eating fruits and vegetables, there are natural occurring heavy metals in our soil. That is just inherent. But when you're eating whole fruits and vegetables, what also accompanies those heavy metals are fibers, which helps our body to bind the heavy metals and actually get them out of our body. When we're taking a greens powder or even in a smoothie, truthfully, we're not getting the same benefits from fiber as if we were eating it in its whole food form. So, especially in the greens powders where it's highly, highly, highly concentrated amounts of vegetables or even some fruits, we are exposing ourselves to higher levels of heavy metals, mostly. A lot of the powders are also not organic, which is just something that, depending on your comfortability, I also would not recommend. And if you're eating a well-balanced diet in general, I don't think it's a necessary thing. I'd rather you take a multivitamin than the greens powder, personally. It also contains prebiotics, which are added fibers, and live probiotic strains. And for the population that I work with, mostly some of them have actually had GI issues because of these pre and probiotics. So again, it's just something like, I think it's very individualized. I'd rather tailor what your needs are more specifically than just this blanketed thing. I think a lot of them have like really amazing marketing. A lot of influencers use them. Very trendy right now, but I don't think it's a trend that's going to last, honestly.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I can speak a little bit to the elixir. I think one of the primary differences being that, like, we're not putting, it's not vegetables stripped down. So it's not that same, like, heavy metals without the fiber situation. The elixir is micronutrient replenishment, very specifically tailored to a woman who or a person who menstruates needs. So we're looking at research that shows, okay, these nutrients at these levels have supported different menstrual symptoms, have supported hormone balance, are needed for the endocrine system to function well. And you're just getting those micronutrient needs as opposed to trying to replace fruits and vegetables. We still want you to eat your fruits and vegetables, whole foods. And the elixir just provides that daily insurance that you are meeting all of the micronutrient needs. I think for me, like the feedback that I get from our community and our customers the most is when they see results very quickly. Obviously, people love to feel that. And to me, it just immediately calls out like they're probably magnesium deficient, and that magnesium is making a huge difference for them. So we do have a high level of magnesium, and we just switched to a glycinate magnesium, which is even better. So yeah, just micronutrient daily insurance plan.
Yeah. And I especially like it for people if you are going through some type of hormonal transition, if you're coming off of birth control, if you're trying to conceive and like getting your body prepared, these are the nutrients specific that will be helpful in that fashion. And like Monica said, it's also what a lot of individuals are commonly deficient in. So that's where I like it. And I actually like that it's more specific. It's not this huge bucket of things that we might not need. Like that's when we talk about having really expensive pee because your body is just getting rid of them. So I really recommend that for that reason. Actually, David has been taking it more recently. He had a headache yesterday and I was like, here, take some Mariah. And he's like, it's so good.
I love that.
You're not going to grow boobs. Nothing's going to happen.
No, it's just vitamins, people, but it's unique to menstruational needs. So awesome. Okay, next question. I'm 36 and had an irregular period for what feels like the first time in a long time. I'm wondering if this is due to age. Is it normal and will that be happening more often or is this the new normal? So basically, I think what this person was getting at is, could this be the beginning of perimenopause for me with my periods lengthening? And I did ask a follow-up question of just like, what kind of irregular period are you experiencing? And she said that it was 2 weeks later than usual, meaning her cycle was longer by 2 weeks. And then had a very, normally has a very regular period. So obviously it was a very unique situation when she's used to having very normal periods.
Things that I would just kind of ask or questions before I would give any sort of answer is what's been going on? Has anything changed in the last few months even for you? As I was mentioning earlier around stress, like did work change? Is this been a busier season of life? Sometimes summer for people, they're traveling a lot and their schedule looks really different and their sleep is different. So just reflecting back on that, have you been sick? Anything that could potentially alter your cycle. I would also say like going at least 2 to 3 months, watching 2 to 3 cycles and just tracking them to really get a better understanding of, is this your new normal? I can't predict if it's going to happen next cycle or the following or in 6 months from now, even for myself, just because there are so many variables that go into our cycle length and flow and everything. So I would say just start or continue paying attention to that cycle length and flow and if there are changes. But I mean, there is potential that it could be the beginning signs of perimenopause for you. And that's okay. Like, it's really interesting. There's no definitive time period for when menopause starts or when it finishes. So I know individuals who have been perimenopausal for 10 years and they still get a bleed. And so I've known people who have even conceived during this time. It's not a definitive or like an endpoint. And I think for us and what we've talked about, especially around some of the exercise recommendations and things, is just maybe altering how to support your body a little bit more. And if that transition is beginning for you.
One of the other things that I was going to say is not just looking at or it could be interesting for you to even think about not just how the last month might be different, but because it does take, 3-ish months for the follicle to become dominant, it might be just worth looking at the last few months. So even as far back as 3 months ago, what happened then could affect your cycle that you just had. So being mindful of that, it's kind of like a longer continuum sometimes than just month to month. And thinking of it in that way. And then, just kind of seeing what happens in the next few months and if it does become a new normal or if it was just a one-off instance.
Hormones and hair loss. What is the connection and how do we prevent it? This has been coming up a lot for me recently for individuals. And it can be related to your hormones, but it's not always true. So there can be things going on with your thyroid. It can be nutrient deficiencies, especially iron deficiency. So if your body is not absorbing enough nutrition, or we're not getting adequate amounts, we can absolutely have hair loss. So I even really like to look at people's nails as well. This is a quick little thing to see if you might potentially be experiencing anemia or potentially iron deficiency. If you press firmly down on your fingernail, it should turn white, meaning that the blood flow is being pressed. So then when you release, it should turn back to red. So if it stays white, then you may potentially have some deficiencies. Also, if you have vertical lines running the length of your nails as well, this is another common thing that we see with B vitamin deficiencies. And then if there are horizontal lines, it's really common with B12 deficiency. So, between looking at that, if you've noticed some hair changes or other skin changes, potentially it could be more of this nutrient side of things. And again, that's something that we can do. But from a hormone side of things, what we typically see, especially in individuals that have PCOS, if you haven't watched or listened to the PCOS episode yet, be sure to go back to it. But testosterone, or having more androgens, the associated male hormones, or DHT, which is dihydrotestosterone, elevated levels of that can be correlated with hair loss or thinning in women. So being mindful around that, that's something that we can absolutely test for. I'm happy to speak more on that. And then other things that we've talked about too are endocrine disruptors, a bunch. That can definitely drive hair changes as well, things that you're actually putting on your scalp, your hair quality, the health, even in our water. So I've even noticed since moving to a new city that the water here, or I live in Philadelphia now, so I should say the water here has impacted my hair. And I put a water filter on our shower and it's still not amazing. So all of these different factors can impact it. There's also potential for genetic patterning. So if this is common in your family, that other individuals have thinning or loss, something that might be hereditary for you. And then, of course, stress, as always.
Curious your thoughts on, you talked about how it could be nutritional deficiency related to hair loss. Do you have an opinion on hair supplements?
So biotin is actually helpful for more like the hair, skin, and nails, and collagen also. That is what our skin is made from. So that's why I really put collagen more into the beauty supplement rather than a protein supplement category for me. But otherwise, even zinc is really helpful for our skin. Again, just getting enough nutrition is so important if you're overstressed, overexercising, undereating, of course. This is really common.
Yeah. Biotin and zinc are both in Maria, just saying. Awesome. Okay, next question. Very similar, but someone asking about hair thinning and falling out after birth control, but their blood work is normal.
Yeah. Again, this can be a sign of it doesn't need to be typical, that polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, but what I commonly see is this transition off of birth control, really mimicking a lot of the PCOS symptoms. And this is very common, very, very common to have hair changes coming off of birth control, the thinning, acne on the jawline, even having new hair growth that wasn't typical for you. Acne can be associated with that. So a lot of different symptoms that I would say is common with that, like post-birth control syndrome or post-birth control PCOS.
Yeah. Go back to the birth control episode, listen to that one. Those are all some good tips to implement. And then the PCOS episode, we also talked about post-pill PCOS. So
yeah, nutrients first. That is what I would just say broadly. A recommendation is need to make sure. So yeah, getting that good quality multivitamin in is going to be really helpful just as a security blanket. especially if you're not absorbing it from your food.
Okay, last question. Take it away, Nora.
Okay, bloat and high intensity interval training. Monica, why don't we just recap real quick on our thoughts on HIIT and SIT, sprint interval training?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, what was this question? Just that they get bloated from doing HIIT?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we talked about this extensively in the Stacey Sims episode. We also did the Stacey Sims recap. So HIIT itself, there's nothing wrong with it, but what has been coined as HIIT, so your F45, your Orange Theory, boot camp classes, a lot of times those are called HIIT workout classes, when in reality, those are moderate intensity workout classes because you're sustaining a higher heart rate for 30 to 45 plus minutes. So that really causes a lot of stress response issues. Our cortisol increases, puts our body in fight or flight, and then we are holding on to our fat stores and our energy stores because our body thinks it's running from a bear. So what can be beneficial is if we do what is actually known as high intensity interval training or sprint interval training, where your work period is actually quite short. You're really just doing like 30 seconds on because that's all you can sustain, right? Like you can't sprint for longer than 30 seconds unless you're an absolute animal. And then you're recovering fully in between your sets. So that might be 2 minutes, 3 minutes where you've come back down to a baseline heart rate and then you go again. So big differences there, and you're not creating that same cortisol response in your body.
Yeah, thank you for reviewing that for us. Things that I typically see if people are waking and already feeling bloated is actually more associated with constipation. So this can be a sign of just low motility or things just not moving through your system appropriately. We do want to, it doesn't need to be a quote unquote flat stomach, but you should feel that kind of reset in the morning. And then it is natural to have changes in our body shape as the day goes on, as we're eating and drinking, we're holding on to things. But if you feel like you're waking and already feeling bloated, it's typically more constipation or this low motility. I see this too with people who they wake and they might feel that reset. And then as soon as they start drinking water or they go and do a fasted workout, like a HIIT, and then they're feeling bloated already. So this is also really, for me, more of a sign of low motility. And also, I don't want you doing fasted morning workouts in general. So it really comes back to the stress response again, where there's not support on fat loss and doing fasted workouts. It is really just going to elevate our cortisol, our stress response in an unwanted way. So getting fuel is going to be helpful, and you can still reach your composition goals. And doing so, you're going to perform better and recover faster if you are fueled.
So do you have any thoughts or suggestions if this person, obviously we talked about transitioning away from the moderate intensity or what they consider HIIT to sprint interval training in terms of motility? Obviously go back and listen to the gut episode, but what are some quick tips for someone who's dealing with slow or low motility?
Yeah, that's where really my work comes in, honestly. You can go back and we've definitely talked about like more mindful eating, but yeah, sitting down, chewing your food, being more mindful around your meal times, not eating on the go, not working through every single meal, not being stressed all the time. All of that is going to help with your digestion. Actually, chewing your food instead of swallowing it whole, obviously, is just going to make things operate a little bit better. But typically there is a contributor to having low motility, and that's something that I work on in my program Harmonize as well. It's where we start with everybody because it's so common.
Girls poop.
Girls poop. We should every day, at least once.
Amazing. Thank you everyone for submitting such great questions and for trusting us with your concerns and questions. You know where to find us if you have continued questions. Obviously, if you're looking for more intimate support, reach out to Norah. And we are so excited to continue supporting you here.
Yes. Let us know what your favorite episode of this season was or is. If you're listening, tag us on Instagram. We love knowing that you're listening to us. We've gotten such amazing support and resounding. It's so nice to have this community. So thank you all for your continued support and listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.